Welcome back to SCL 3, an intense match in its own merit. A match coming to a draw. I don't think that's ever happened. So, wow. And I will go ahead and throw it to our commentators. So, Eleanor, that match.
Not the most exciting match I've ever seen. Some good piloting there, some impressive managing of the reps, probably especially from a PL team with more ships with a weaker frigates there from Matt Bazzi. Impressed he managed to keep it up under all that pressure at the start. There's a lot of cap pressure under there as well from the Dommies. It looked like eventually something was going to crack, but it just looked like they managed to kill all of Warlord's team's drones to the point where there's so little damage on there that both teams, I think they had pretty much run out of cap charges at the end as we were seeing newts starting to drop off, cap transfers starting to drop off, just so little damage left, but no one could actually kill anything. Bit disappointing, really. We were hoping to see lots of people die, especially Gobbins after bringing another Tinker Tank.
Yeah, an intense match, indeed intensely boring for the viewers, but I agree with you, impressive by the piloting. Both teams did what they came to do impressively well. They didn't really make any mistakes, but this is the matchup that, like the SCL organisers, we've been fearing all along. You know, two of these Tinker setups against each other, leading to a stalemate. And I think we're going to have another look at our rules. This time we nerfed the cap transfers. We only allowed one per ship, hoping that this would be enough to limit these Tinker setups, but with the use of NOS and heavy cap transfers, and it appears it's not been enough, so we're going to have a rethink. We don't want to completely get rid of this style of setup, but we need to look at doing something to limit it.
And actually, I just got something in. We have decided to institute a small tweak to our rule set. So with our bans, we are going to add an additional ban for each team. So now each team will be able to ban 3 ships. So this should bring a new dynamic to the final for the Syndicate Competitive League and really shake things up for these next upcoming matches. I'm really excited to see what kind of results this will produce.
I think it's very interesting to see there the cans being dropped around, stuff like that as well. There's a lot of micromanagement going on there. So although the damage was dropping off towards the end, I imagine cap boosters were probably dropping off as well, and it was probably extremely close at several points there. Like if one of the cans had been shot at the right time and we hadn't been able to get the cap boosters, the ships that need them, that might have swung the match. So impressive piloting there.
It is. It's a very daunting task to manage all of that because it's active tanking and you're managing the cap boosters and we saw them dropping the containers. So really when it comes to the technical side, this was some really impressive flying.
Yeah, certainly right at the start, Graf's Merlin did look like it was going to drop. I'm impressed he managed to keep that alive. But Bazzi was definitely an interesting change, letting those Merlins and the Hawks actually get a bit of range, move out, and getting a bit closer on them and play around a bit more, which you haven't really been able to see before from the Tinker setups.
Now, Lucky, as a pilot, dealing with these Tinker setups, what's your insider's view on managing these kind of tanks and then fighting against them?
Well, for a start, I want to give massive props to both teams. They managed the capacitors really very well indeed, and although some of the viewers might have been a little bit bored at the end, it, from experience, it is very stressful managing a kind of tank like that. I mean, you have to be so so on top of your game. There are a lot of buttons on one of those T3 lodges. Um, Managing heat, you have to be a very, very skilled pilot. Coming up against them, newts are a killer, but then running newts takes cap as well. And at the end of that, I think, they were all out of cap boosters, and it's just two very, very good teams that have come up against each other and bounced off, as it were. Yeah, it was a really, really good match.
Now, I have to ask, what do you think about the approach of trying to give Pandemic Legion a taste of their own medicine by bringing sort of this uber tinker tank to the match?
Well, I think when the Hydra brought that, they didn't expect PL to bring another Tinker setup. I think they thought, as you just said, Ari, they were going to give PL a taste of their own medicine and just annihilate PL with a Tinker setup. But then they came with two Tinker setups, and yeah, I mean, if you're going to do that, you really have to be sure that your opponents aren't going to bring a Tinker setup, or we end up with a match like we just saw.
At the same time, I think they tried to build against Tinker Setups. You saw those heavy nukes on the Dominies. They were probably prepared to fight one. And with the frigates there, we were kind of expecting the Dominies with their boosted tracking now to be able to blap one of the frigates straight off, and possibly just those points of frigates would have had the match. But excellent tanking from the PL team, keeping Graf alive there and a Tech 1 frig against those guards. It was definitely impressive to see, and even if we get another one like this, it's extremely close. With the cat warfare there as well, keeping a ship up alive and being able to rep all those different targets. I don't know, not a bad match in a way. That sort of thing, that piloting skill requirement is extremely high in most Tinker setups when it gets like that.
Now, I do have the bans for round 4 of the final. Pandemic Legion has chosen to ban the Maulus, Celestis, and Caries. Warlords of the Deep have banned the Tengu, Loki, and Proteus. So what do you all think about these bans as opposed to the match that we just had?
Yeah, well, the PL have basically done their same bannings all along, but just adding another one onto that list.
Yeah,
And
I think the 3 bans has pretty much just made it a bit stronger for PL, really, being able to ban more of the same damping ships.
yeah, I mean, if they're going to bring a Tinker setup, then they can actually make that Tinker setup stronger and ban out more of the things that can counter it. So to be honest, as much as we're trying to stop tinkering, I wouldn't be surprised to see PL in another Tinker. But they won't be using, obviously, a Tengu, a Loki, or a Proteus, but we might see a Legion.
Yeah, we've just seen a Basilisk in a Tinker setup there, so you could ban all 3 Tech Frees. It's still not going to stop it. Sorry, all 4 Tech Frees. I don't think you can actually ban out this setup.
I'm very excited to see these bans. I mean, they're banning basically all damps means one of 2 things. Either they could tinker with a Basilisk, or perhaps they're going to bring something like ECM.
It's going to be a very interesting match indeed. Hopefully the teams will bring something a little different to the field. Like Elise was saying yesterday, sometimes the teams do use a higher form of meta and try to psych each other out. So who knows really what they're going to bring to this match. It's just we do know that it's 2 good teams and anything could happen really.
Yeah, exactly. But with the banning the Tengu, the Loki, and the Proteus, if PL were going to bring a Tinker with a strategic cruiser repping, it's going to have to be the Amar one. So at least with this, the Genos guys could load up on Amarian Drammers for a higher chance there. So hopefully this triple banning we've just added will make things a bit more exciting in these next games.
I've said I don't really think it's going to make much difference, just because, as we've seen, they can do it with the Tech 2s. I don't think we'll see with Tinker again next time. I think we'll probably see a different setup again from both sides. But who knows? We'll see what we get.
Now, there have been a lot of changes to the Singularity server since the last Syndicate Competitive League matches. Now, Lucky, with the addition of the new ships, how has this kind of affected the meta your team has been using for the tournament?
Well, the new ships didn't so much affect the meta as the rule changes, and specifically the points changes on Marauders and the E-War frigates. But in terms of the new ships, I know a lot of teams have fielded the Navy Hurricane, and we did have several comps with the Navy Hurricane and the Navy Drake, both very strong ships, and both quite exciting. We also managed to sneak a comp in, although we didn't run it, with the new 10th anniversary battlecruiser, the Gnosis.
All right, and how did the points change affect what you were planning to field, and what comps you were going to bring?
Well, previously we've usually run either a pirate faction battleship setup or some Marauders, and specifically Marauders going up to 19 points, I think it is, from 17, means that you can't bring 3 Marauders and supports as well. So Marauders, very, very powerful ships. They have the utility highs for 2 newts or an energy transfer, a newt and a smart bomb, making sort of battleship tinker tanks possible, and also you can use energy neutralizers as tackle to chase down some not so fast kiting teams.
All right, and we've also seen bombers used a lot more in SCL 3 as opposed to SCL 1 and 2, and they received a points reduction. Now, how has the utility of the bomber affected the comps brought, do you think?
Well, specifically with the Bombers, I think the only team that I've seen, I've not really been keeping up on the stream earlier today because, of course, I was busy fitting ships and worrying about what was coming up. But the Bombers that I've seen have all have been from the Warlords of the Deep team, and they've been fit with what appear to be void bombs for taking care of Tinker Tanks again, energy neutralizing bombs that. From what we could gather, when the bombers started, they had long-range torpedoes loaded, and the bomb launcher was actually offline. And what we thought happened is that they've waited for the correct moment, and they've obviously launched those energy neutralizing bombs to give them the capacitor advantage.
Now, Seld, from a commentator's perspective, what's your opinion about these bombers in SCL 3?
Well, I'm just glad to see them again. You know, back a couple of years ago in the Alliance Tournament, 6, 7 bombers were really popular. And then they just became less popular, they were a bit more points, less value, and they just didn't really fit into people's tactics so much. So we want to see them back. We want to see electronic warfare frigates back. So that's why we took a point off of both of those ship classes. So their actual uses haven't particularly changed, but because they're cheaper, it's a lot easier for teams to bring them. So they become better value for teams. And as we saw, like as a tactical tool there to get rid of a turtle tanking setup with those void bombs, it was a really original, really effective use of the bombers. And I'm hoping we're going to continue to keep them at these points. And hopefully we'll see more of these in some future tournaments.
And what about you, Eleanor?
Yeah, I like the idea of all the different new ships. I'd be interested to see if we have any more balance changes, especially if we get these Navy ships in. If we get new versions of the Navy battleships for the next tournament, I think that could be very interesting, especially if they start to throw in the pirate ones as well. That'd be interesting if we get big changes, like we see a new Navy Geddon reflecting the changes to the current Geddon.
And that could certainly happen. We will have one more Syndicate Competitive League. We will have the fourth one probably in June, and then we'll take a little bit of a break because Alliance Tournament should be announced soon. And we do want to make sure all of our teams have time to focus and really center in on what they're going to do for that competition. It's going to be a fantastic competition. Hopefully, when the call for commentators goes out, hopefully some of my fellow SEL commentators will be on there. Do either of you plan on putting in an application?
I'll probably give it a go, but I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I've not decided. I might be applying, I might not. I'd also quite like to actually do the Alliance Tournament as a captain again, but once they announce the call for commentators, I'll probably make a decision whether or not I'm going to try and apply. And I think the same stands for Brendan back as well. I think they're also keen to commentate, but also keen to be in the tournament, so we'll see.
That's true. All of you do have, most of you, well, yes, all of you do have extensive tournament experience and have been in the Alliance tournaments. So I guess you're torn between two worlds on how to participate. That's a fantastic thing, right?
Oh, they're definitely good fun to fly in. They're fantastic.
Yeah, they're really good fun, but again, you can't overstate as being a captain for the Alliance tournament is the amount of actual effort it requires. It's an incredible time sink. It's stressful. There's so many things you need to plan out, so many things you need to think about. So for once, it might be a nice change just to see the tournament from the other side.
So when it comes to putting these tournament teams together, what really goes into it from a captain standpoint?
Well, from the captain's standpoint, it does differ between all the different teams. In some teams, the captain plays more of like a dictatorial role. Like for example, Tyrax Thork, he runs his tournament team like an absolute dictator. He has the final say on everything. and it's basically just the Tyrex Thork team, and the other guys are just acting as his drones that he launches in space to try and win the match with. And other teams, like, they do it more like a democracy, you know, they delegate everything out. They got some guys fitting ships, some guys doing their tactics. When I run my team, I'm a bit of a mixture of the two. I like to have a sort of committee of guys who I respect their opinions, and we formulate all the setups together. But when it comes to actual buying the ships and fitting the ships, I do that all myself. I like to keep everything completely secret, and the actual match, the actual setup I'm going to use in the match, I basically don't tell anybody in the team about until half an hour before, when I just dish out the ships, dish out the implants, and that limits any chance of any intel being slipped to the enemy team.
Yeah, I think PL's generally run in a fairly similar way. Is a lot of arguing goes on in comms between Mr. Rive, Gobbins, Black Horizon. Can be slightly stressful to listen to the three of them, but Rive tends to stand up for himself pretty well, so can be fun at times.
Well, I think specifically with the Reputation Cartel, it's not certainly as organised as maybe the Pandemic Legion team or Tyrax's team, or indeed your team, Seldrin, when we fought in New Eden Open. But generally, I think all Alliance tournament pilots, to be considered for a team, you have to be very, very skilled. You have to be supremely competent and confident in your abilities on Tranquility. And generally, I think confidence, competence, and just having a decent, I hate to say the word reputation, but you have to be renowned for your piloting abilities to even be considered for a team like that, and you have to be able to stand up for yourself.
I think practice comes down to it a lot as well. We've seen generally the teams that win are the teams that put in a lot of effort practicing. Even with pilots who aren't that active normally on Tranquility, you fly a lot more tournaments, you just get used to flying with the same people, you fly enough against setups, you know what to do against them. And it simply comes down to the more practice you do, the better you'll get on. And if you don't practice, you don't have much chance, simple as that.
And a lot of teams, they don't like to do so much practicing because they're worried about being spied upon. But when you're practicing, you don't just need to practice like the actual setups you're going to use, and you don't even need to practice setups. You can practice like set maneuvers. Like a lot of the practicing I did with my guys was just for frigate pilots, getting them the ability to clear drones quickly, their ability to tackle quickly, their ability to keep range, all those sorts of things. And it doesn't give anything away about any of the setups you're going to bring, but it sharpens all your pilot skills.
Now, one strange thing about tournament pilots is that there are a group of them who only really fly in the tournaments. And for some games, that may seem really weird. Like, how can these people be all that good if they're only flying for a couple of weeks or months out of the year, out of the entire year of playing this game? Like, how do you guys attribute teams wanting and utilizing players like that?
Well, I think it does take its toll. I mean, we've seen with some fantastic tournament pilots just come in and make absolute fools of themselves and make really rookie mistakes. And I think those are your examples of people just playing for the tournament. You really have to keep PvPing, especially if you're bringing these harder to fly like kiting setups. Those sort of twitch skills, they leave you unless you practice. So you do have to keep playing. Or if you're just going to play for the tournaments, at least come back a month before and do some intensive like solo flying or small gang flying just to sharpen your skills.
I think if you practice enough, that playing on the main server isn't necessarily that important. If you're flying tournament practice, it is a very different style of PvP normally, especially to people like us who are just flying around dropping stuff in our Titans because we're not really that good anymore in the smaller stuff.
Another big part of setting up a tournament team is the theory crafting. Now, how does one do theory crafting? Like, how does it start? Where do you even begin when you open up EVFT or PyFor or EveHQ and start to create a fit for a new ship that's just come into the game, or a rebalanced ship?
Well, when I'm doing my theory crafting for the team, I don't really look at the ships and build a setup around the ship. I think of like an overall plan, like an overall tactic, like range control kiting or like these Tinker tanks. And then I just basically find the best ships that can fill the roles to make that tactic as strong as possible. Like I remember back in the Alliance Tournament 6, I think it was, when I was the captain for the 5. It's when we first did the long range missile dampening, and I just had the idea of kiting at range with cruiser hulls, no logi, and just kite and spam cruise missiles and dampen down the locking range of the team. And back then, the best ships that we used for that were a mixture. We had a couple of Drakes, and then the rest were Navy Caracals. Back then, they were really strong. And that's how basically I do my theory crafting. I just find the ships that fit the roles for the tactic that I think I want to use.
I just do it like on Sissy. Look at someone else's setup, think it looks pretty cool, steal it, change one or two tiny things, and call it something cats, and win.
So you take the Steve Jobs approach.
Yeah, pretty much. Just watch Soldiers of Thunderstorm, see what they're flying this week, and that's the new setup.
Very nice. What about you, Lucky? How does Reputation Cartel do their theory crafting?
Well, we have a forum that we visit, and basically we'll come up with a load of wacky ideas, and we post them all on there, and then we sort of thin it out, as it were. I mean, you know, obviously you get the comedy comps, like let's all fly Hawks and Harpies, and no, I want to do a Badger Mark II fleet, and then someone goes and EFTs a Badger Mark II full of damps and one full of ECM, and then, well, we get angry and shout at them for a bit, and then something sensible arises from the ashes of that.
I think the question that is on everybody's mind, however, is how does Tyrax Thork do his theory crafting? I would love to hear from him on that regard.
I have no idea, but it doesn't work.
I don't know, he's got pretty far into a lot of tournaments. Whatever he comes up with, it does seem to work pretty well.
You know, maybe we'll have to have him on. I did have the opportunity to sit down with Tyrex for a team captain interview, so you'll probably be hearing that during SCL 4. But the teams are on the field. Here we are with round 4 of the SCL 3 finals, Warlords of the Deep versus Pandemic Legion, and I will be tossing it to our magnificent commentary team, Bacchanalian and Brent.
And welcome back to the